don't you take it away and just sort of welcome everybody?
Yeah, so I'm sure most of you have found out since you're here that Lightning Talks, we try and do this once a month. It's been stretched out a bit further than we'd like, but the purpose of them is just to share some of your experiences of what you've been learning, what you're excited about, stuff that's gone beyond the curriculum, and then just share with fellow students. And as a side to that is you get used to talking about technology, you get comfortable trying new things and exploring things and helping people out. So it's kind of a win-win all around. And you get a recorded video, so if you really wanted to, you could share it with a potential employer just to show your passion and your experience and gumption to go out and try something new. So yeah, if you're new, it doesn't matter if you just learned something super simple. Like my talk is going to be about something I learned 2 weeks ago and I barely know, but at least it's a conversation piece to get people talking. When we first started this, the first lightning talk I did was a lightning talk about a topic I learned 6 days before we actually did it. So it's really nothing so small that you couldn't do, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to find whatever you want to talk about valuable.
Yeah, so how do you sign up, Colin?
So if you want to sign up, you can head on over to, that's not the right link. We got this wonderful Lightning Talks app that we built. And there you go. So that's the link to the Lightning Talks. If you are not already signed up and signed in, you'll get the landing page, which kind of gives you the how, what, why, where, and also links to the previous talks for the YouTube videos. Once you sign up, you can either go through the list of talks we've already have up there. Most of them I add them on things I want people to talk about because they interest me. But if there is something that interests you, you can always add a topic yourself. Even if you don't want to talk about it, if it's something that's you find interesting and you'd like somebody to talk about, sign up, add the talk, start voting it up, harass people to vote it up more, and somebody might decide to do it. Otherwise, if you want to do it yourself, you can always assign the talk to yourself. Give me, Ken, or David a little ping in Slack and tell us you want to give us the talk, and we'll schedule one for the next ones. It's also open source, so I do have a list of issues and things I want to get done on it and bugs that need to be fixed. So if you want to do some open source contributions, jump right in. Some of them's really easy, like add content to the About page. So if you just want to get used to doing pull requests and forking repos, it's a perfect entry point for somebody.
Yeah, and that one was actually just opened up by Merkle. So it definitely would be welcome if somebody wanted to contribute. So feel free to do that. And it's an app that actually is getting used by us. So it's kind of cool to be able to contribute to an app that's actually in use. So that's pretty cool too.
And if you want to see like a use case for more like pure vanilla CSS and leveraging Flexbox, I redesigned the whole thing and got rid of Bootstrap, so there is no Bootstrap. It's just pure CSS. So if you want to get a feel for more of the foundations and dig into something like that, it's a pretty decent use case for that as an example, and how to use Sass and leverage it in your Rails applications.
Yeah, it's really cool. Well, cool. Good stuff. Let's get started with the first talk. So, Ernie, I think you're up with your first talk, which is on searching, I believe, building a simple search function in Rails. So, Ernie, why don't you take it away?
Okay, hello, everybody. I'm going to share my screen.
And I'm quickly going to mute everybody else, including myself.
How's that? Can you see that and hear me?
Now that everybody's muted, yes, we can see it and hear it.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're all good.
So my talk is going to be on, as you can see, building a simple search function in Rails. And when I was doing Nomster a while back, I thought as I was finishing it up, I thought the perfect thing that it would need would be a search box. So I did a little research and looked around and found some gems and some other sites that had code, and it looked pretty doable. But at that point, I didn't really feel up to the task, so I put it aside. And so this is perfect that this topic was on the website, and I could pick it up and figure it out. So I started to think, what criteria, because I wanted to limit it, definitely wanted it to be a simple search functionality. So I came up with some criteria for that, and of course I already mentioned I was going to use it in the Nomster app. It would be a simple keyword search. The users would enter the keywords, and of course the search would do what searches do and share the matches to the user and alert the user if there were no matches. And I wanted to have the search form show up in the nav bar on every page, which is pretty standard. And I wasn't going to use any Ruby gems. There's quite a lot of Ruby gems out there. There's a few there that you can check out. I felt that it added some complexity in just installing and setting it up, as well as functionality. I just wanted a simple keyword search, so I didn't need a Boolean search or drop down menus and stuff like that. I would like to go back and check out simple search because it looked pretty cool. And might have worked well in this situation, but I had already kind of gotten started with my thinking and stuff. And so as I was starting this, I asked myself, every website has a search engine. They're a search box. They're ubiquitous, and we pretty much take them for granted. And I asked myself, why would my website? It's kind of a dumb question, I thought, because it's kind of a tool. It kind of goes with the territory. You're going to have a search box eventually. So I asked myself, why do I need a search box? And actually, the answers weren't so bad. Of course, the user UE is enhanced. They can get their content fast. I don't know how many times I've gone to a website looking for something and there was no way to search, and so I immediately left and found another website that I could search, although that doesn't really happen so much anymore. And then any other content you have on your site, the user can stumble across that. Users that use the search feature are looking for something, and they might take action on your site if your site is generating anything for you. And then it adds a polished and professional look, of course, and analytic. You can use it for analytics. And so this code right here, there's a mistake on this page, but I won't point it out. And this is pretty representative of the type of code that I found out there on the internet. There's some variations, but it was basically all the same. And I was going to talk about this, but I figured I would just go right to the app and talk about that code because that's what's relevant. So I put my search form in the application HTML ERB because I wanted it in the nav bar, and that's where the nav bar lives. So this is basically, it generates the HTML that shows up in the nav bar. It says search and has the little icon. I've done some Bootstrap styling on it because Bootstrap was part of the project. So that's basically what that is. And I'm using a form tag, which is a Rails helper. And So passing the form tag places path and the get request and excuse me, and places path the get request. Yeah, and it's going to trigger the index action in the controller. And this is pretty much the meat of all this code right here. The rest of this stuff really is there to make it look good. This text field tag search makes sure that the search parameters stay in the text box when the results page shows up, because that looks good. And of course, there's a placeholder, and then I have my button, and that's that. So the index action is triggered. It basically runs a search. I mean, it tests for if it's a search or not. So if it's a search, it's going to run this code and pass the parameters. What I'm actually searching for are the name fields in the database, description, and address in the database. And I think I had to add address to make it work. It wasn't in there. I'm not sure. But so we go to the model, and here's our search method. This line 12 right here is PostgreSQL stuff. And this, let's see. So this is pattern matching, and I like is a keyword in PostgreSQL, and it's basically looking for patterns in your search parameters. And so basically, here's my 3 fields that you saw earlier: name, description, and address. And so basically, this says how I interpret it is where this sort of matches, because I like is case insensitive. Where this sort of matches, name, then it's a match. This question mark, I wasn't really going to talk about that because I'm not sure what it is. I think it's some sort of security feature or something, but I don't know. And as you can see, I have places for the parameters for each one of the fields, and these percent signs are wildcards, so that if you're searching, Nomster's a food app, right? So if you're searching for burgers or hamburgers or burgers and there's hamburgers, it will return the burger result. It's a new term. And so back to the places controller. And if it was indeed a search, it's going to print out our search results just like before, by order of name, using Cominari. This app using Cominari, 5 results per page. And as you notice, I use the index. I would have liked to have made a separate search view, but I never got around to that. And but having a model or a controller and a search view might have taken some of the code out of this controller, or out of this part of it right here. So if there's no search, of course, this was the original line that was in there from the original app, and it's going to display the results 5 per page by name. So that's pretty much it. I did there's an alert message that I put in the index page. We'll just go in whatever view I use to display my results. And so it's no big deal. It's just a sentence that says, that doesn't match. And so with that, I'll just demo the Nomster app for you. Here's my search box. And so I could search, it's lowercase, so it's case insensitive. Hence the I like. See right now these are ordered by name. When and if it refreshes, we have Pizzeria Toro. So another thing about this is that having another view specifically for the results, I think would look a lot better because you could stylize it as a results page. A user that's not paying that much attention or something might turn and look at this and not realize that these are their search results and not the index of the website. So that would be a good reason to do that. I could search by city, and so you can see that it works. It doesn't do like more than one keyword unless the keywords are part of the sentence right next to each other. These are all restaurants in Durham. And so that's it. If I were to, things that I could do in the future, of course, another view, specific view for the search results, make the search box responsive, maybe try to put some of that code into the model, get it out of the controller, and then try out some of the gems in advanced search materials out there, search gems. So that's it.
Really cool stuff, Ernie. I've written code that looks exactly like that, like so many times. Like the way that you set that up was just like perfect, using the index action to deal with the sort of like searching behavior and querying that stuff. It's really a super common pattern, even though you kind of pointed out you could move it into its own view. Overall, I think the code that you used looks awesome, and I'm super interested to hear if you, in the future, if you end up integrating with the simple search gem that you sort of indicated you thought was pretty cool. I'd love to hear more about that, but really excellent talk. Does anybody have any questions for Ernie?
Yeah, not really a question, but if you wanted to take a look at how I implemented search for the Lightning Talks app, I basically wrote almost exactly the same thing you did and popped it into models. So if you want a reference on how to do that, it's there. I shot a link to the actual repo, but and then we also did it on the show page. What would be cool is to do, if you really want a challenge, do it so you have active search. So as you're typing, it'll start filtering through stuff. If you want to really leverage JavaScript in a way that is actually useful. I don't know how much TurboLinks will like it, so you might want to disable that. But it could be pretty cool for the Nomster app.
Yeah, really cool. Does anybody else have any other questions or anything else to add? Cool. Super good talk, Ernie. It was super cool to think about some of the search stuff, and I think you picked a really good way to do it. Having played around with Elasticsearch, I know how much more painful this can be than the way that you did it. So thumbs up on sort of coming up with an awesome solution and presenting it to everybody. Your talk was awesome.
Yeah, you could talk to Angel about Elasticsearch.
Thanks.
Michael, you're up next.
Awesome. So finally get to do a lightning talk. So my lightning talk is going to be on a app I've been building. Let's see. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Okay, cool. So let me make this bigger. Okay. So I built this command line interface tool / I guess you could call it a framework. It started off as just a file generator. I was learning React, and if anyone's actually tried to go through and learn React or any JavaScript framework, there's a lot of boilerplate code that you just have to type over and over and over. And coming from Rails, if you've never learned a JavaScript framework, you're kind of spoiled and you don't realize how nice it is that Rails does so much for you. So I built this application called Mikey. And if you go on NPM, which is a node packet manager, if you're not familiar, it's kind of like Ruby gems. And you can download this package. And over the past, I'd say, 2 months, maybe, I've been building this out and adding features to it. So like I said, it started as a file generator, and eventually I added project generation, and I've recently added 2 other types of projects. So let's start with that. If I type in Mikey, it's just like Rails generate, basically. It's actually very inspired by it. So if I type in Mikey and then new, if I just want a regular project, which is right here, and then the project name. So if I type in just a random name, it starts running, it transfers all the files over to where you currently are in your current directory, and then it starts running npm install, which is like kind of like how you install Ruby gems. So I already pre-did this. So after it's done, this is what you'll see. And I kind of added a little cool colorful art to it for fun. I was bored. But after it's done, it tells you the name of the project and what command you need to use to start it. And the thing with Node on npm, there's this thing called the package JSON, which has different commands in it. So that's why I specify this, because it could be different depending on which project you're in. So if I check out, so once it's done installing, you can run it. It tells you the port it's on. And it's as simple as that to get a project up and running. The nice thing about this over just creating it from a random boilerplate is I've organized it logically, like you would see in Rails, where you have a views folder or you have an assets folder. It's very similar. So that leads me into talking about, let me get out of this. So in Mikey, you can also generate files. And it generates the file and it finds your folder. So this can also be used outside of Mikey, kind of, as long as the folder is named properly, it'll find it. So if it's nested deeply within your project, it will generate the file exactly where it should. Otherwise, it will generate it in the root of your project, the directory you're in. So it'll generate it no matter what. And if you have the folder type properly named, it will go exactly where you expect it to. And also, if you have a test directory, it pre-generates some tests. So if I go and I launch an IDE, So here you can see the source directory has your CSS, your images, your configuration files. Here's the package JSON with those commands I was talking about earlier. Here's a start command that I use to launch the server. All your dependencies, which are like your gems, your Ruby gems, for those who aren't familiar. Here's my tests folder, the folder where all my React files would go, and everything's set up already. So if I go into and I generate a container, for example, it's just like Rails generate. So I go Mikey, and then the command is right here, and then the file name. And I try to make this as user-friendly as possible. So then I also tell you pretty much most of the details you would want to know. It tells you if it's successful or not. It saves that random path that it finds, and I actually save it to this randomly generated folder. And these are all your paths within your project. So if say you don't have the folder names like components, say it's named something different, you can actually change it or modify these routes. And the reason also why I save it is because it's faster than randomly finding the path every single time. All it has to do is read this folder and the specific file. And then if you look down here, it says it's successfully created, and it also tells you that it created a test. And if the test or file exists already, it tells you that it exists already. So you're not overwriting the files you've already created. Another nice thing about Mikey and the file generation aspect to it is that if you look here, this is the file that I just generated, this container, and I'll show you the test. This is the test I generated. If you look up here, there's these imports, and in JavaScript, you have to implicitly import different things you're intending to use per file, which can be kind of, if you're coming from Ruby, it's kind of tedious at times. But what I've done is when you create a file, for example, you can actually import things on creation, which I guess it would be similar to when you create like a migration file and you want to implicitly say, I want this certain field with this data type. So if I generate I'll generate a component this time, which is a different file. Let's do this. So I can type in -i, and then it will add this import, this dependency to the top of the file. So if I import, this is a HTTP library, it's not very important, but if I do that, and we look, here's a test component. Oh, wait a sec. Maybe I have a bug. It didn't generate it. Let me see. I think I have a bug. Okay, anyway. It's another thing on the list to fix. So you can import, or you're supposed to be able to import dependencies to the top of the file. And then if you have several files you want to generate, say I have several components like this that I just generated, and they all have similar dependencies, I add them to what's called defaults, which is this right here. And every time you import something, it gets added to that specific file type's default. So if I wanted to, instead of typing out a bazillion different imports like this, like if I did, and I wanted to import like another import, and I did like a bazillion different types, I don't have to do that over and over for every single file. I can just include defaults by typing this, and it will add the defaults to that file. And I said before that it tells you if it's already generated, and this is what it looks like. And you can list list your defaults also. So if I go Mikey-L, which is for the short for the list right here, and you can type in the specific file type you want to list your defaults for. So I can just do all. I don't know if it added it or not. So because it's bugged, but it lists out every single file type and the defaults you have for that file type. And then if you want to erase, if you want to erase any defaults, you can do that with this command. And you can choose the file type or do all of them. Unfortunately, I'm thinking of adding possibly specific ones. It's kind of, I don't know how useful it would be. But if you type in Mikey-E, and then you can erase all your defaults, just like that. And then the last thing that I added recently is custom file templates. So if you're not happy with any of the predefined boilerplate templates that I have here, you can actually create a file in your project and save that file and reuse it over and over and over. So we can walk through that. If I go and type Mikey, save template, and then you type in the file type. So in my project, say I really like this nav bar. I want to save that component. So I type in component, and it's singular, and then I press enter. It lists all the components in that folder right here, and you can select which one you want. So I can just do nav bar. You don't need the extension. And then I do that, and it saves it. If I want to list it, this is listing it. This is what it would look like. But if you want to just list it without doing anything like creating or saving or deleting a template, I can just list it, Mikey lists templates, and then same thing, I can type component. And it will list every single saved component template. And then if I really don't like this template, I can delete it. But first I'm gonna actually use this template. So I'm gonna have to delete this because I already have it. And then if you look right here, I have this G file, which generates a custom file from a saved template. So I can type Mikey, G file, and then the file type. So I can type component again, just like before. It gives me all the saved components that I have. And I just type navbar. And then I can change the file name. So it doesn't have to be called navbar. I can call it literally anything else. But we already deleted navbar, so it's fine. I can just say navbar, and it generates it. And it also does everything you would expect it to do with testing. et cetera, et cetera. And then the other two things I want to talk about, which I added recently, are universal applications, and I also have an Electron template. So you can develop desktop apps with React, Redux, and Webpack, which are all these projects. They're all based on that. So I already generated it. So I'm going to go to Universal first. And what Universal is single page apps. Search engines have trouble indexing websites that are very JavaScript heavy and single page. The markup, it's the search engines have trouble indexing it because when they're scanning the web for it, it doesn't actually render all the content. So you might have like a really nice application, and if you're depending on the search engine, a lot of them can't really index it well, and you'll have this all the metadata from your site won't actually be saved properly on the search engine. So I've created, they have this term called isomorphic or universal, which actually within this specific project, what I've done was sync the client and the server to be in sync, and to also share state and routing. So it's a really complex. It took me a really long time to figure out. But if I run it, and I can show you what I'm talking about. So this is Webpack. It bundles everything. Basically, what that means is it basically outputs one JavaScript file onto your index page, the main page. So it looks the same because I've made each template very similar to each other. So that's another nice thing, is that you have the same file structure between each template, whether that be regular, universal, or Electron. But if we look at view page source, this is all the CSS in my application. This wouldn't show up in production, but this is all my CSS in my application. So there's no flash on load. Everything loads immediately, which is another thing that's nice about universal isomorphic applications. And also, if you look down here, there's this window initial state. And what this does is, for those who are not familiar, Redux is basically a state control API, basically, where there's a single place where all your data is stored. And what this is doing is it's populating the index page with this data, so the server and the client can read it in sync with each other. And if you had, for example, if you had it like a GET request, and you're populating, your website's populated by like an API, and you need this data, if you didn't have an isomorphic application, right now I haven't populated anything, it would look like this. This is just the markup that's already in my index page. But if you have a API, if you're using, like say you do a GET request, when you load up immediately, it's already pre-rendered. So it doesn't have to wait, it's immediately already there. And that's why this works better for SEO. So that is universal. And then if I go to Electron, this was interesting to get running also. It's, if anyone's, if for those who aren't familiar with Electron is an open source project from the people at GitHub, and things like Atom is built in it, and Slack. There's several other things that are built on Electron, but those are the ones that I guess most everyone at the Firehose project would be familiar with. So if I run this, Webpack bundles it, and then what will happen is it will launch this window, and it's really just a browser, but it's really not, it's not at the same time because you don't have all the same functionality. So if I type, this is linked to the Firehose project's website. If I click on that, it'll load. But if you look down here, it's not loading the jQuery. So it's not exactly a browser, but it has similar functionality to it. And another nice thing about this generated Electron template is it also has all the dev tools included already. So it's not going to find React. But if I go back and rerun it, so it has all these dev tools included. So here's the React dev tools. Let me make this bigger. React dev tools. So it shows you all your components and the state it's managing in its different components and all the params and props to each component. There's the Redux dev tools, which I said before was this thing's in the way. It manages all your, if I don't know, most maybe for those who are familiar, this is where your actions would go, and this also can keep track of your state, so all your data within your application. And then there's also, I haven't gone into this yet, but this is the dev tools for Electron, which I guess has a lot of native desktop-related OS hooks and stuff like that. So you can do, for example, like notifications up here. Yeah, that's Mikey.
Very cool stuff. And for everybody else, this is like really, really, really advanced stuff. And to the point where like some of this, like me and Michael were working together a little bit, and like I spent like dozens of hours trying to get some of the stuff working that he ended up getting working in like the universal and stuff like that. So this is like really crazy advanced stuff, but it's also really cool stuff. And if anybody, I think actually Nathan Elliott had a really good question about Axios.
Oh, okay.
He asked, do you have Axios already in it, or did you need to add it?
So yeah, I didn't clarify that. I'd eventually like to add it that when you're importing a dependency to a specific file, that it installs it if it's not installed. But currently you have to have it, for it to actually use it, it has to be installed already, but it'll still write that dependency to the file.
Cool, got it. What about, so Nick says, if you have never used a JS framework before, which is the easiest to start a small project? Ember, Angular, React, Meteor, etc. What do you think, Michael?
React is definitely the smallest. It's not necessarily a framework, but with all the NPM dependencies, it can be similar to a full-fledged framework. That's another thing with React, is that you don't get everything. It's a very small API, so there's a lot less to learn, but the concepts are very, very like complex, and there's a lot of things if you get into Redux. There's a lot of functional programming related topics. There's you get into immutable data structures and stuff where it's a lot to get your head around, but those concepts I think will translate over if you've done React and you've done Redux, then something like Angular 2, which has similar concepts, and then the newer, Ember, I think it's Ember 2, they use components and they use state. And so I think right now, in terms of like scope, that React is probably the easiest to get into at first, because you're just writing, you're still just writing HTML technically. It's the same syntax, or close to it, and then you're just dealing with a few different methods, like on components there's like lifecycle methods. So when a component renders, before it renders you can tell it to do something, after it renders you can tell it to do something, and you can also, it's very modular. So if you don't want to just learn React and Redux and Node, you can add, actually I think someone's going to talk about it, you can just learn React on top of Rails, which is a whole nother thing, but it's much smaller and easier to get into.
Yeah, the one thing I might add on top of that is I feel like Ember 1 is really similar to Rails. So I think if you know Rails, you can probably pick up Ember like a lot quicker, as opposed to what Michael's talking about, these like complex computer science things that like you need to learn to actually fully understand React. Like once you understand them, it's kind of simple, but like understanding the hard stuff can be a little bit difficult too.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, think of it too as what's the available resource that's behind the technology as well. Ember is a fairly open source project where you don't have the backing, the financial backing of a company like Facebook. Same with Angular. Angular would be great, but they completely overhauled it. So anybody who's coming from Angular 1 or who learned Angular 1 is struggling with learning Angular 2. Versus if you just jumped into Angular 2, it'd be a whole different story. But Angular 2 is so new and so fresh that the material out there isn't widely available. So it almost may not even be what's the easiest to learn, but what has the most resources and what's going to be there for the future. If everybody's going to this component-based JS framework, then why not stick with something that's going to be there for numerous years because you have a huge juggernaut backing it? So it's something to think about, but it's going to be like the same thing with any sort of framework. A battle between Bootstrap and Foundation, or whether to not do it or just write straight JavaScript versus using a framework,
The article that I linked in the chat window about Angular, Ember, and React has a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, Colin, covered in the article, including older versions versus newer versions, how many downloads there are, how many forks there are, the kind of support that each of the frameworks have, which ones are closer and further from Rails in their I guess, paradigm. It's a really good article, very helpful as far as trying to figure out which direction to go in.
Honestly, though, I mean, I actually might even recommend someone who's just trying to get into the JavaScript framework to get a sense of Node, because then you're getting into using like CommonJS, which is like that importing I was talking about before. And maybe even you can learn how to build a server in this API called Express, and build like a little tiny CRUD app in Node. And maybe get into that and get familiar with how the JS ecosystem works. Because if you build that, then you can add on something else on top of it, and you can keep extending it.
So is Mikey an open source project that's looking for contributors?
Yes. More than I would love someone to contribute to it, because it's just been me this time, and some help from Ken.
There was one other guy that helped out. Didn't he do like one pull request?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to get the npm install. When it installs it, it runs all this crazy graphical loading bar, and I couldn't get it. And then he made a pull request, or he forked it, and then he said he was going to do it, and then I found it, and then he pull requested it. So that's basically the only contribution to the project.
It's super cool. I've used it quite a bit, and it's pretty awesome. So if you're if you're learning React, like, I think it might be there's the Facebook one that they just sort of, maybe that's a good question for you, Michael. What's your opinion about the Facebook, like Dan Abramov's CLI?
That's what I was going to ask too. Is this the same thing as that, just jacked up on steroids to make it more like Rails?
Yeah, his is kind of interesting. I don't know if I agree with the way they went about it, because their idea behind it is they're concealing a lot of like it's intimidating getting into like this React and JavaScript and Webpack, especially the bundler I was showing you, because there's a lot of configuration. They hide it from you, which is good and it's bad, because then you're not exposed to it, and then you really have I don't know. It's hard. It's like it can go both ways, but it doesn't have. You don't get like file generation. You don't have a lot of the tree structure, the way it's organized. Testing, all that stuff is built in. So, for example, Mikey, whereas that's just like you want to build something in 2 seconds. It's not as quick. So if you're learning, it might be better to start with it. But if you kind of have an idea of how Webpack works, and you want all that exposed to you so you can modify it, then something like Mikey would be a better choice.
Yeah, I think so too. Cool. Does anybody else have any other questions for Michael? Cool. And again, for everybody else, super advanced talk on super advanced JavaScript stuff. But it's also super cool to see like what you could be doing, and even building like desktop apps with JavaScript and Redux and Webpack. It's just crazy stuff. So really an awesome presentation of almost the future of development, where things are going. But Colin, you're up next. Do you want to share your screen and get going?
Yes, I will. So I gotta find the right desktop here. So basically, it's kind of a two-part talk on just some things that I've found extremely useful in both the front-end design of the world, and some things to consider when you start going out and building your own apps, or if you do freelance work. It's just some good food for thought for future things that not a ton of people talk about, but the people that do talk about it know what the hell they're talking about. And I've just basically learned about progressive enhancement, and within the last 2 weeks, and I've completely drank the Kool-Aid on it, and it's completely changed how I've been thinking about designing websites and applications. So first, I'm not going to really play through these, but first I just kind of want to go over organizing SaaS and designing deliberately. So I talk a lot lately about not using Bootstrap as your crutch for doing all your design and your styling, because there's so much work that you have to do, and there's so much stuff going on in the background, and you don't have a ton of control over it. So I've been writing just straight CSS or Sass lately and designing stuff, which if you look at the new Firehose Lighting Talks app, that's completely stripped out Bootstrap out of that. And one good thing that I've learned is how organization is like the number one thing when you're dealing with this. So I can show you what I'm talking about in terms of organization. So this is the actual Firehose Lightning Talk app. And I kind of break down SAS into two sections: your base SAS, which will have your font imports, your global settings. So this will be all your just HTML, things that you're going to reuse frequently, containers, alignments, alerts, buttons, inputs, things that you'll use on nearly every page of your application or your website you're designing, a base typography, and then all your variables, which comes in handy. And then, so that's kind of the base of your styling. That's what you're going to build upon. And then from there, you can go into components. So we have our admins page. We have cards that are going to be reused throughout the application. We have a footer, the landing page, and our search boxes. So the reason why I do this is because when, especially working on groups or coming back and working on your code at a later date, it's super difficult to jump in and look at a big long CSS file of bootstrap overrides and you're not quite sure what's going on and you want to modify something and it wasn't named properly, which I was prone to do in my beginning stages of coding. I would name things really random and they weren't descriptive. And now I've started switching over to this style. So if I wanted to change something on our admin page, I can quickly jump into my admin styling. I can fix something right away. It's very easy. You don't have to worry about anything else. You don't have to search through code. It's just really straightforward. And then something I just kind of wanted to go over because Rails does a lot of things in how gems get installed. So when you install the Bootstrap gem, we use add imports to import Bootstrap. But if you look through your style sheets, you actually don't see any of the files there. So it's not being presented. So this is just a good example of how that actually works. So each one of these are written as partials. And then in order for me to actually utilize them, you just import them into your main application file. Pretty straightforward. Obviously it's CSS, so everything's cascading, so you need to make sure that you order them in the right order. So your fonts always will have to come first because that's, you're going to build everything basically off of fonts, which is kind of weird to think about, but you're going to set your variable properties and you're going to use font families. You're going to use your variables in your typography and so on and so forth. So if it's not working properly, just make sure that you have imported in the right order and life will be so much easier. So that's kind of just a high level example of organizing. And the reason why you want to do this is because it's super maintainable. You can precisely style everything that you need to do. It's scalable, so in the future when you need to make a change, you're only making a change to a small portion. Everything's in a tidy little bow that you don't have to go through and you don't have to make crazy changes throughout your whole entire styling, which is a nightmare for running on any older applications. And it's super friendly, so if anybody wanted to jump in and contribute to an open source project like Lightning Talks app, and you wanted to work on some of the styling, or there's a bug that needs to be fixed, there's a couple things that do need to be fixed, which I'll be issuing issue requests for, you can jump in and it won't be too confusing for somebody who's not used to it to find the location of what they're looking for, because it is human readable and because it's organized in the way it is. So that's kind of the first part, just a little overview of something to think about when you're going through and designing your applications. And if you want to start straying away from frameworks and getting the foundations really under wraps and figure out exactly what you want to do. So it's kind of something to just consider when you're developing applications. So the second part is progressive enhancement. And this is the Kool-Aid drinking that I've been doing. Basically, it is a strategy that emphasizes accessibility, HTML, and your style sheets and scripting. So when the web was built, there's so much fragmentation. and we've kind of got it under a web standard, and we've gotten to a point again where we're starting to fragment from a standard. So everybody's kind of branching out and doing their own thing. So progressive enhancement is the technique of starting from your base HTML. So you can write a website and it will work on Netscape 4 if you have some weirdo that has not had any new technology in 20 years and wants to use something old, can still read your website. Or it'll work all the way up to Firefox Nightly's. And then you also won't be restricted from speed. So if I have a website, like I was telling Ken earlier, before I stripped out Bootstrap from our Lightning Talks app, the app was, I think, 6.1 megabytes or 6.2 megabytes, which all in all isn't huge in like the United States or in Europe or Asia where you have really fast internet speeds. That stuff loads fairly quickly. After I stripped out Bootstrap, now our Lightning Talks app is only 1.3 megs. That's going to be a big performance increase for somebody who's on dial-up or somebody who only gets 1 meg down. So the site's not going to take forever loading. So it's something to consider when you're doing that. Your audience is not always necessarily just you or the people you talk to. Most of us are in affluent style areas relative to the rest of the world. So we have fast computers, we have fast internet, we have access to these things, where if you look at Africa, for instance, almost everybody's running off 3G. 6 megs on a 3G connection on a cell phone is fairly unacceptable. So you want to start out with a base layout, and that's kind of where you go out with your semantic HTML. So I just built this simple little layout because it's really easy to get into the weeds and the stuff, and people do it justice way more than I can. So you want to start with a base layout, and this is going to be readable on any device. Any device that can read HTML will be able to read this, and they'll be able to have a specific experience. And this is just kind of the styling. So just do it super simple. We have floats that's used in you can use that all the way back. I think Netscape was like the last browser that leveraged that CSS style. So you should be able to use it. So basically anybody who's got a computer in the last 20 years that has an internet browser will be able to experience this website in exactly the same way as everybody else at the bare minimum. And then just put in mobile breakpoints and all that lovely stuff, which you guys already know about. And then here I just have our base styling for an article. So this is just going to be a straight up text, and I can just show you what the actual website looks like. Nope. So this is what it would look like at the end. So it's nothing special. Like I said, I didn't want to get into the weeds. It can go way deeper than what this is, but it's just a simple text website. But everybody is going to have the base experience, and from there you start building upon that, and that's where the progressive enhancements come from. So this is what it would look on a 10-inch tablet and up, and this is what it's going to look on mobile. Nothing special, but everybody's basically going to be served up with the same experience no matter what browser you're using, what device you're using. Everybody's going to get that experience. And this is kind of where @sports comes into effect, which is a pretty nifty new thing that I started learning recently. And you can leverage specific CSS attributes that aren't supported for different devices to make your browsing experience more of a base and global usability. So it's very similar to media queries, where you will declare @supports, and then you'll put in your code that you want to abide by that specific thing. And so for here, I wanted to utilize Flexbox instead of just standard floats, because floats are the way of the past, and it's time to start leveraging some of the new stuff that we have. Most browsers support Flex, so this is not the best example. Like I said, I have links to other talks that have way better examples, but if you want to look at it, Flex is supported by nearly every browser except for IE 8. 11 has partial support. So it's not the greatest example of it, but it's pretty neat how it actually works. So how @supports works is when you declare @supports, you can put in the attribute you want to check and see if that browser supports. So for instance, we want to use Flex. So we're going to suggest to look for whether or not it supports display Flex. So anything IE 11 won't load any of the styling. IE 8 won't load any of the styling. Only browsers that support display Flex will load the styling. So now you have a base experience, and everybody who can support the new hotness on the market will be able to experience an enhanced experience. It's going to be nicer. It's going to look better. It's going to be styled better. And you can just override all the CSS that you did on the basic experience, and this kind of gives you the ability to use the latest technology to support certain devices, make it super responsive and user-friendly. And then I did the same thing with the articles as well. So this is more of an example of the power of @support. So if you look at a website, in magazines and books, you have the first letter of a paragraph that really kind of shines and has that emphasis on it. CSS doing this in CSS sucks. It's terrible. It should be something that is intuitive since everybody wants to use it. It's just not available. So if you look at it, it's just something simple. It's just paragraph, first of type. So this is the first paragraph of a number of paragraphs, and the first letter. And we're going to style that first letter, and same with down here. We're going to style the first line with a specific font weight. But what's really cool is there's this new, it's in the web standards, it's in suggested web standards. It's very early into it. It's not even listed on Can I Use, which is this initial letter, which makes the drop caps for paragraphs work exactly how they're supposed to. I think the only browser that actually works with initial letter right now is Firefox Nightly's. So you can run this @supports, and if you're running the Firefox Nightly browser and it sees that initial letter is here, it will run the initial letter code, which is pretty cool as far as what it says. Otherwise, everybody else gets the same experience. If your browser doesn't support this, you get the fallback experience. If your browser doesn't support this, which pre-IE 8 doesn't support first letter, your browser will get the base styling. So then this is just kind of what it looks like with the drop caps. And because I didn't have the supported browser, the initial letter CSS doesn't actually work. So that's kind of the end of the talk, and it's I don't do it justice by any means, and I won't claim to be the greatest authority on this topic, and there's so much cool stuff. So like I was talking with Ken earlier, there's going to be a new styling, so it's supposed to go hand in hand with Flexbox, which is the CSS grid layout. And as you can see, the only things that support it are Firefox Nightly's, which you need to also have the experimental enhanced flag checked, which nobody does by default. And what the grid layout does is actually creates a grid layout for CSS. Floats were never designed to be a layout element for the way we use them, and which is how Bootstrap leverages, their columns, is by using floats. Flexbox does a really good job of this, but it does have its limitations and its fallbacks. Whereas grids will be a straight up grid. You're gonna be able to set fractions, and it's gonna be able to fill in all this cool stuff. If you want to check it out, you have to download Firefox Nightly's to be able to see it, but I think maybe I can actually. see if I can load this up just to show you grids, because it's pretty neat how they work. So if you, let's see, and I lifted a bunch of the stuff I know from Jen Simmons, which I'll link to all this stuff because it is just really good. So because I have the experimental flag ticked on Chrome, this stuff actually works. So you'll have grids on here, but I don't know if I can. I'll have to restart everything if I don't do it. But basically what you're doing is setting up these cool grid layouts where, I mean, I don't even think this works properly in Chrome all the way. So you have grid layouts, and this is kind of the power of it is you can set grids, and then it'll fill spaces, and you get an actual grid experience. You don't get some hacked up CSS to make it work. So it's pretty powerful. Like I said, I don't do it justice. Watch the talks by Jen Simmons and Rachel Andrews, and listen to some of the podcasts, and you'll be drinking the Kool-Aid very fast after that. So that's about it. If you guys want to talk about it, we can.
Very cool stuff. And cool to know about like the Firefox Nightly build. And it's also interesting to know that Firefox is like the company that's at the bleeding edge of some of this stuff. I didn't know that. I kind of assumed the folks at Google Chrome were sort of leading most of this, but it sounds like Mozilla is doing.
Which they do. You just have to. They switched their engine recently, so you have to like. I think they're using Blink Engine now, so you actually have to go out and download Blink Engine to get like the really advanced stuff. Like the initial letter and all that kind of stuff. But there's so much cool stuff that's on the horizon that's going to kind of throw away a lot of the frameworks as we know them, because you won't need it anymore. It'll be way more lightweight. And same with, there's also columns, I believe it is. So it's kind of like a grid, but you can use it more for its multiple column layout, in which surprisingly, the people who are on the bleeding edge of this is Microsoft. So IE 11 and Edge, full support for this multiple column layout. So if you looked at like a newspaper, you can mimic a newspaper layout or a magazine layout in the multiple column styles. And everybody else, you have to have the experimental flags or the browser prefixing for. And from what I read, actually, Microsoft started the grid layout. They were at the forefront of it, and they're building it to the standard, and they're working with the other browser manufacturers to build out the standard. So as much as I love to hate on Microsoft, they're making a lot of good changes and pushing things forward and not keeping it stagnant like they used to.
Very cool stuff. Does anybody have any questions or any comments for Colin?
I know it's really high level as far as like conceptually, but it's just something to start thinking about. If you want, I'm going to put my slides up with the video when I post it, because there are some good links there to listen to some really good talks about all of this stuff, and worth the time listening to the podcast and spending to do it, because it's fundamentally changes how you think about designing a website and user experiences. It may not, a big part of this is because I've been working with a client lately, and 90% of the clients he has are going to be major businesses that all have the latest browsers and running the latest operating systems. But because I also know the customers, I know there's tons of old fuddy-duddies that just do not want to upgrade any of their machines. They're still using IE8. So I had to start building some of the fallbacks for that stuff. And it was, after writing for a modern system and then having to write fallbacks, I spent almost 20% of the time designing it for those IE fallbacks just because I didn't think about it to begin with. Not that he cared or anything like that, and he flat out told me don't worry about it, but I also didn't want to screw over some of the people that he works with, so I did build it out. But just thinking about that stuff is important.
Very cool. Well, cool. Awesome talk, Colin. It's interesting to think about some of the new cutting edge things.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to chat about it, I haven't really talked to anybody who has listened or researched any of it. So I've been wanting to talk to people, and everybody I talk to, they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's like, well, this is a terrible conversation. So everybody drink the Kool-Aid so we can talk about it.
Sounds good. I'm pretty excited about it too.
Yeah.
But cool. John, I think you're up last.
A blog post about that stuff with all the links to all of the resources by any chance?
Yeah. Basically just look for anything that Jen Simmons has done in the last 2 years. Same with Rachel Andrews. They're going to be the forefront of this stuff. Another thing that I didn't nice, Mike. I didn't talk about is CSS shapes, which is really cool, and Jen Simmons has done a lot of work with showcasing some of that stuff, where you can kind of look into the progressive enhancement of using how floats are actually designed to use, and then leveraging the new CSS stuff as an enhancement on it, but have that safe fallback if you need it.
Cool. Some funny conversation going on in chat. John, do you want to take it away and jump in about your talk?
Flexboxes, yep, sure. Let me get the screen thing on.
Okay.
Okay, sweet. So, hi everybody. My talk is going to be on Flexboxes. So, what are Flexboxes? Flexboxes are a new CSS spec, and what that means is it's just a new series of properties that can be used to style how layouts and how websites work. It's very flexible and very powerful, and it was kind of made with a lot of the problems that modern websites have, like being responsive and kind of a lot of the other problems where a lot of people use certain things on every website, but it's also hacky, like for instance, vertically centering things. There's just not really a good way of doing that. And if you go through the Flexbox spec, there's a lot of different properties, but it's also very easy to get started. So hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll be able to start applying a lot of the Flexbox stuff and not get overwhelmed by the specs. So the way that a Flexbox works is actually very simple. There's a container. So think of the purple container as a div, and then the orange containers are just children divs. So they're just called the items, and then there's a larger container. So I'm going to be referencing this webpage a lot throughout this talk. And I think it's really, really good. I reference it a lot, and you guys can pull this up if you want. It's called A Complete Guide to Flexbox on CSS Tricks. So basically, to get Flexbox working, all you have to do is this, display Flex. That's it. It's very simple. And then you'll have activated Flexbox. So there's 4 main things that you should keep in mind when working with Flexboxes. And don't worry if any of this sounds abstract, because I'm going to go over several different demos. So the first thing is that the Flexbox properties only affect the direct children. So if I have this purple div, when I start manipulating the Flexbox properties, it only affects these elements and not the divs that are inside these divs. So it's really good thing to know. Also, for this talk, we're actually only going to be focusing on half of the Flexbox properties, which are the properties on this container, just to keep things very simple and get you guys started. Also, one other really nice thing is that when you set the parent div to display Flex, it will automatically make all the children div the same height. And also by default, all these divs will be on the same row. And why? And so I actually put row in quotes because this gets a little bit tricky. So here's the next slide. So for flexboxes, there is a default direction. So it's called the primary direction, and by default, the primary direction is just kind of the normal flow. It's just along the x-axis, and so and then there's a secondary direction. So by default, it's along the y-axis, and so you're able to use justified content to manipulate items around the x-axis, and then you can use align items to manipulate things along the secondary axis. Okay, so we're going to start with the demos just right off the bat. So right here, I have this. I have this code pen that what I have is this parent div right here, and then I just have a bunch of children divs. So this is how things look. Oops. So yeah, so you can see just like normally, if I didn't have display flex, these elements, they just break on to the next line because this is for item 1, I don't have, they're not inline block, these are just divs. So they all go to the next line. So when I activate Flexbox, they all just automatically line up along the same row, and they look like this. So flex direction by default is row, and this just moves them along this axis. But I can also make it column. And now this becomes the primary flex direction. And so what that means is all these things are now kind of reversed. So justified content will change things along this axis. Can you see my cursor? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so justified content will then change things along the y-axis, and align items will change things along the x-axis. Okay, so that's very basic Flexbox stuff. Okay, so more demos, and also feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. If you have the question, odds are everyone else will probably have the same question. So the first demo is vertical centering. So this is something that there has not really been a very good solution to. And with Flexboxes, it's extremely, extremely simple. So I have this, again, same idea. I have this I have this one item inside of this parent div. So to center it is just one line. So let's see. So align items right here is the property that I'm going to use. So to center it, all I have to do is set the parent div to align items center. And so once I do, align, so first I activate Flexbox by doing display flex, and then I do align items center. And now it's centered. And so say I also want to center this along the horizontal axis, piece of cake too. I just do justify content, center. And so justify content, center. And boom, and now I have a div that is perfectly centered in the parent div. And that's it. That's super, super simple. Okay, so next big use case. I have these product boxes, and you see this on a lot of different websites because it's a very common pattern. And what ends up happening, let's see if I can find the actual slide somewhere. Okay, so here's a website, and this all looks well and fine. But as I start shrinking it, you can see because there's different amount of text here. It's no longer straight. And there's a lot of different hacky solutions, and a lot of them revolve around using JavaScript to dynamically change all of this. But again, this can be solved pretty easy with Flexboxes, because all you have to do, let's see, I don't have the, I have a, oh, there we go. So again, here's a bunch of different things, all on different heights and whatever. And by, again, using just Flexbox display, suddenly everything is now the same height as the parent div. So this is probably going to be easier to see if I make this 200. So yeah, so now everything is along the parent div. And so if I want to keep going making these product boxes, I probably want to space them out correctly. So I'll use justify content space around. Okay, so things are looking a lot better. And yeah, and then you can just set the widths. So one thing you can't do with Flexboxes is set the widths dynamic based off of the container, but you can just go in and just do width 60 pixels. And now everything is perfectly aligned and centered and everything just kind of works. Okay, so now let's look at something a little bit more advanced. So say I have this nav bar that I want to make where I have just these items just in this nav bar, vertically centered, and just these little icons on these sides, and then the logo just kind of pushed all the way over here. So this is actually also very easy to do with Flexboxes, and I will show you how to do that now. Okay, so here's how I started things off with, very simple. We just have this kind of parent, which I already set flex on, and then just these elements here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to vertically center these. And so again, we just look at, what's the property here? Justify or align items. So we do align items center. Actually, yeah, so align item center. And so now these are all centered along here. And now what I want to do is actually put all these items on the right-hand side. So back to here, I'm going to do justify content flex end. Okay, so now they're all on this side. And I kind of want to space out these like logo or these nav links more. And to do that, it's just how you normally do things. You can just use part padding or margin. So I'm going to do just margin right 15 pixels. Okay, so now I got these links. And now to push this logo all the way to the left-hand side is a very neat trick. And it's actually just another margin. So when everything is lined up like this, if you just do margin right auto, this will just automatically push the logo div all the way to the left if there's space for there to be a margin here. So if you just like, if you were to right click, you can just see that this logo just has the margin all the way pushed on the right-hand side. So again, this is super, super simple, and it prevents you from having to do a lot of different divs and padding to make sure everything's centered and works correctly. All right.
You could also, I'll just jump in there just because it's a useful knowledge point. You could also wrap your elements and then use space between. So you could have, so if you have an image and your title for your logo, you could put that in like a branding wrapper, and then you can do your navigation links in a navigation links wrapper, and then just use space between, and that'll shoot the navigations all the way to the right and all the logos all the way to the left, because it's using all the space in between to separate them. So then if you're on different devices as you move, it'll still knows to use that space between until you hit a certain breakpoint. But that's another way of doing it. That's pretty simple if you want an alternative as well. I don't know if there's any drawbacks with the flex end stuff, but that I didn't know about that either, so that's kind of slick too. So
Yeah,
there's more than one way to do Flexbox stuff.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of it's a very flexible
Yeah.
system. So yeah, so space between also works. The drawback is that if I have like 3 or 4 elements here and I all want them aligned to the right hand side, this can just give me that like right off the bat if you're not trying to do some more complicated stuff. So it's just kind of a simple solution to that. Okay, so with all that being said, the last few demos have all been pretty much manipulating the parent Flex container. And as you kind of got the idea, the Flex container allows you to just kind of do layout positioning. And what the children properties does is it allows you to dynamically increase or decrease these orange boxes. So this kind of leads me to, where am I? Here we go. Yeah. So this leads me to the next part. Do we really even need grids anymore? So let's take a look at Flexbox Grid. So this is a grid system that's entirely built with Flexboxes, and that sounds like something that's very impressive or whatever. But actually, to create these grids is actually just one line of code. Flex basis 50%. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so say we're back at this this container right here, and so currently we've been pretty much just doing all these properties of the container, but we can also change the flex item properties. So what flex basis does is it says after you've placed all these elements inside this container, what do we do with the remaining space, or how do we distribute the space of this container? So say I want the logo to actually take up 50% of this container. I can just do logo flex basis 50%. And now this takes up 50% of the space. And so basically you get a grid, right? You get a grid for free, because if you wanted to do like a column, if you wanted a column to only take up 30% of the space, you can just do flex basis 30%. So flex basis 30%, and boom, you got 30%. What's also really nice is another idea, which is flex grow. So what flex grow does is it says, if there's remaining space, how do you want to divide the space among these elements? So for instance, if I do flex grow 1, then the remaining space is divided equally among this. So if I do flex grow 2, it means that it means that this logo will take up twice as much space as the space left here. So that's kind of, if this is blowing your mind a little bit, you can always come back and kind of learn the item properties later on, which is just, all these properties are just about how you want to divide the rest of the space, how you want to distribute the space when there's like remaining space inside the container. But really, those are kind of the main things that you need to get started with Flexboxes. And let's see if there's any more slides. And yeah, and that's it. And so for reference, I recommend checking out the CSS Tricks, A Complete Guide to Flexbox. There's also a really cool website called Solved by Flexbox, which has a lot of very common problems that are kind of encountered out in the wild that are easily solved by Flexbox. And then let's see, what else do I have? Oh yeah, and then the Flexbox grid. What's really interesting about this, if you never kind of dove into checking out how grid systems work, like how Bootstrap works, and it's just kind of magic, you can kind of look into these like source codes, and the CSS for these kinds of grids that use Flexboxes are really, really simple. It's just this. So yeah, and so that's it. That's my talk.
Really cool stuff, John. So do you actually use this on a like pretty regular basis, like, and to no longer use any of the other positioning things, or do you still use the like floating and stuff like that?
So my company just started rebuilding our entire website. So I've been using Flexboxes almost exclusively for any kind of layout stuff. If I need to whip up like a static marketing page or whatever, I'll still just use like a grid just because it's just really easy. But yeah, I'm using Flexboxes for mostly everything. And as Colin showed on like Can I Use, Flexboxes have pretty wide support. There's still like a couple of bugs that you can see which is tracked on GitHub, but those things are pretty trivial.
Yeah, once I learned Flexbox, I will not use anything else unless it's absolutely necessary, even though I just preach progressive enhancement. But like it, get it as simple as you can. But if you really want to have fallbacks, but just there's so much leveraging you can use with Flexbox that solves so many problems and keeps your code really lightweight. It's interesting to look at that Flexbox grid. I don't know if you know why that max width is set on those elements for each column, but that is a Internet Explorer fallback. So what's kind of funny and a little caveat that most people need to know when you use Flexbox is you have to set a border box, which basically allows you to set widths and margins and stuff like that without going outside of the box, which is super helpful. And you need that to actually use Flexbox properly for everything except for Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer was actually the only browser that got it right from the beginning. So now you have to do this weird hacky stuff with Flexbox because it will actually, when you use border box, it goes beyond the box, which isn't designed how it's supposed to be. Internet Explorer is the only browser that actually implemented properly. So that max width exclusively tells Internet Explorer don't go beyond 33.333% if you want a 3-column grid. So if you are, I just ran into this with client work, and that's how I know this, is I designed it, worked on every browser, and looked at Internet Explorer. I'm like, why is this wrapping onto the next row? They're only 30, they don't even reach a full 100%. It shouldn't wrap to the next row, and it's because how Internet Explorer works is it takes the width and then any margins that are on it, any borders that are on it, it goes beyond the box, so that forces a wraparound. So you have to specifically set the max width. So if anybody's out there and they're playing with it and you run into this, it's just set max width with it right away so you don't have to deal with it. There's some pretty cool things with Flexbox, and if you want to look at how I implemented some of the stuff, you can look at all my GitHub. The last like 3 or 4 repos I've done is just Flexbox exclusively. So
Cool.
and with the Firehose Lighting Talks app, that's all Flexbox. So
cool. Does anybody else have any questions for John about this Flexbox or positioning or vertically centering stuff? I feel like there's been billions of times that I've needed to do this, and I think everybody should go on Stack Overflow, find every single post about vertically centering and fix them because they're all wrong. But yeah, does anybody have any other questions for John?
it's amazing that it took them 10 years to just be like, okay, we need a vertical center to work. Like, you had regular centering the whole time, but nobody in the beginning thought, hey, we need to vertically align something in a box somewhere.
Crazy stuff. Well, cool. Super good, super actionable talk, John. I feel like everybody has the ability now to sort of start writing a lot more clean CSS, positioning things in this, and like it's just really super approachable. I feel like this talk is all you kind of need to get started with a lot of this stuff, which I think is pretty powerful too. The fact that sort of like all of your projects now, you can sort of use the approach that John showed us to sort of like position things in a smarter way. So really, really good talk, John. I wish you gave it sooner because I feel like I've been needing this talk for a long time, but it's super good. Another good talk that you've given was the BEM one. So if anybody is interested in like the other types of CSS organization stuff, there's some other ones that John's given that are also really excellent. So thanks again, John, for giving another great talk. And
yeah, and if you want to watch John's previous talk, it is on the YouTube community channel. So all the videos that we do for lightning talks all get posted up there. I edited out the single talks, and then I post them onto YouTube so everybody can watch them back. So if you did miss that one,
yeah, it's definitely worth a watch.
Yeah, there's the link if you want to watch it. So yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. It gets back to that designing human readable CSS that's maintainable and scalable for future people to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool, guys. This has been awesome lightning talks. Big thank you to everybody who came and gave a talk. So thank you so much to Ernie, Michael, Colin, and John, and everybody else. Think about maybe potentially giving a talk yourself. Sign up, talk to Colin, and maybe you next time can give a talk on a topic that you think other people would be interested in, because there's probably more that you realize that people would really appreciate to learn about. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you at the next one, and make sure to sign up for to give one so we can sort of have that, and I'll give you some time to save the chat, Amanda.
Yeah, there's still a ton of topics. If there are any interesting topics that you want to learn about as well, like I said, you don't have to give a talk. I recommend you do, because it isn't as hard as you think it is, and it's really useful. But if you're super shy and can't do it, at least you can submit a topic. Some people who want to give talks but they're not sure what to talk about, it kind of gives you a starting point of where to start learning something. So it's extremely useful.
Cool.
And I just want more people to use it. So
cool. Well, good stuff, guys. We'll get the recording to you probably sometime next week or something like that. So I guess that's more to the people who couldn't make it. But thanks everybody for giving talks. Thanks for coming and listening, and thanks for coding with us. So super excited to have these talks and looking forward to the next one. So definitely sign up to give one. But yeah, thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you next time. See you guys.
Yep.